Good morning and welcome to Perry Johnson Registrars webinar on IATF 16949-2016. These slides were originally presented by the AIAG in September 2016 and we'll be using them for today's webinar, the second in a four-part series. All participants have been muted to ensure sound quality. If you have a question, please type questions into the question section of GoToWebinar, and I'll answer as many of these as possible at the conclusion of today's prepared presentation. Next week, March 22nd, and the following Wednesday, March 29th, will conclude this four-part series. Part 1 was conducted last Tuesday and included the IATF 16949 transition policy, as well as changes to Rules 5th edition. In these next three webinars, we'll be getting into the changes in the content of the standard itself. These slides were originally presented by Sherry Ritchie and then some of the automotive OEMs. Sherry Ritchie is with the International Automotive Oversight Bureau. My name is Shannon Craddock and I'm the Programs and Accreditations Manager at Perry Johnson Registrars. In addition, I am an automotive lead auditor. So let's spend a couple minutes talking about what is the IATF. IATF is the International Automotive Task Force, and it consists of OEM members, including Ford, GM, FCA, Daimler, BMW, Volkswagen, etc. And then national associations representing Italy, France, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Germany. And in the United States, the member body is the Automotive Industry Action Group in Southfield, Michigan. The IATF has recognized some global oversight offices that oversee the certification bodies recognized by the IATF. And in the United States, that body is the International Automotive Oversight Board. And then the training providers, AIAG in the United States and SMMT Industry Forum in the UK. Looking at certificates, you'll see that most automotive certificates are about 2/3 are in the Pacific Rim. Europe has 18%. North America, including the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and Latin America have just about 10%. South America has just over 2%, pretty equivalent to the Middle East. There are just over 66,000 ISO TS 16949 certificates. You can see that about 28,000 of these are in China. Other countries with a lot of certificates, Korea and India, both having more than the United States and Germany. Japan has just over 1,500, Germany coming in at 3,475. This slide shows the 5 oversight offices. IAOB in the United States recognizes 20 of the 44 CBs. VDA in Germany recognizes 13 certification bodies, or oversees 13 certification bodies, but those 13 certification bodies hold a significant number of the certificates. So looking at how we got to where we're at today, revision work on ISO TS 16949 began in December 2014 and was completed in August 2016. So about a 20-month working period. There was a 5-phase approach to revising ISO TS 16949 into what we have today, the IATF 16949 standard. the pre-build phase, analyze, pre-plan phase, analyze, build, validate, and deploy. Significant working group, 17 global partners from 14 organizations, including some of the OEMs, the global oversight offices, and others. So the new standard, which is known as IATF 16949-2016, follows the same high-level structure of ISO 9001-2015. So you're going to see that the 8 sections of ISO TS 16949-2009 have been reorganized into 10 sections following the layout of ISO 9001-2015. And what's very important, and if you're looking at Facebook or checking your email, this is a really important point. IATF 16949-2016 must be used in conjunction with 9001-2015. So in order to get certified to IATF 16949-2016, you have to buy both documents. You have to meet all requirements. The IATF 16949 standard cannot be used as a standalone document. And if you have the IATF 16949 document, I encourage you to take a look at the foreword, which is on page 7. First paragraph. As such, this automotive QMS standard cannot be considered a standalone QMS standard. It has to be comprehended as a supplement to and used in conjunction with ISO 9001-2015. ISO 9001-2015 is published as a separate ISO standard. So you have to buy both and meet the requirements of both. The IATF created a transition plan and communicated it in April 2016, and it was later revised in August 2016. So one of the first steps was to get input from the key stakeholders. A survey was launched in June 2015, soliciting feedback from over 2,000 key stakeholders. These included OEMs, suppliers from all tiers in the automotive supply chain, certification bodies, oversight office witness auditors, subject matter experts, and the oversight offices. Over 1,700 comments were received for consideration for updates to ISO TS 16949. In addition, there was a face-to-face meeting to discuss the draft standard in April 2016 in Rome, Italy, with certification bodies and supplier representatives. Most of the survey respondents were the various members of the supply chain. Certification bodies also provided a significant amount of input, as well as the OEMs. So one of the themes coming out of the revision process is that the OEMs and the global oversight members look at the linkage between certification and supplier-client quality performance. And there's a belief that there should be a correlation between how you do on your audits and how you're performing in the eyes of your customers. So there needs to be an increased focus on operational performance and customer feedback, meaning customer scorecards or metrics. The new standard contains many IATF OEM customer-specific requirements, so they've been integrated right into the standard. OEMs are raising the bar regarding expectations for audits to reflect systemic weaknesses that affect supplier-client performance. Not looking for auditors to just identify the low-hanging fruit. An uncontrolled document, a training record with the missing acts. We're looking to make sure that auditors are uncovering the issues that lead to systemic breakdowns and impact the organization's performance in the eyes of its customers. The goal, of course, being to prevent problems before they occur. It's important to keep yourself up on the transition process. And the IATF posts updates at www.iatfglobaloversight.org. Okay, let's get into some of the changes in the standard itself. Russ Hopkins from Ford originally reviewed these changes in the AIAG session. There's a legend that describes anything in red is a new change or a new addition. This golden colored star is a modification, and blue is a requirement that's been carried over. So starting in section 431, determining the scope of the quality management system. These requirements were originally included in non-auditable requirements in ISO TS 16949, sections 1.1 and 1.2. They've been moved to section 4, which makes them auditable. The requirement relating to supporting functions was revised to ensure that supporting functions not only address the need to include supporting functions in the audit, but also to ensure they're included in the scope of the QMS. Any exclusion sought for design and development has to be preserved as documented information. So, to me, this isn't a substantive change. Supporting functions always should have been included in the scope of your certification and quality management system. And if you can exclude product design because your customers are doing design, the exclusion shall be justified and maintained as documented information. And no change, permitted exclusions cannot include manufacturing process design. Section 432 talks about customer-specific requirements. And the need to fulfill and satisfy customer-specific requirements was mentioned many times throughout TS 16949. In IATF 16949, this requirement specifically addresses the need to evaluate CSRs and include them where applicable in the organization's quality management system. This means the supplier needs some sort of process to evaluate each of their customers' customer-specific requirements and determine how and if and where it applies to their quality management system. So auditors will be looking for some evidence that you've gotten your arms around all the applicable customer-specific requirements, some of which may be published at IATF Global Oversight, might be flowed down to you in supplier quality manuals, contracts, purchase orders, terms and conditions documents. You need to provide evidence that you've analyzed these requirements and included them in your quality management system. Section 4411 talks about the conformance of products and processes. And this comment was adopted based on IATF survey feedback. It ensures two things. The supplier or the organization is responsible for the conformity of outsourced processes, and all products and processes meet applicable requirements and expectations of all interested parties. To ensure conformance of all products and processes, the organization would need to take a proactive approach to assess and address risks and not only rely on inspection. So here, I think this is essentially communicating two things. The organization is responsible for any processes that are outsourced. They're making the business decision to outsource those. They're still responsible for them. And here is the first mention of the 9001-2015 concept of risk. So there are risks to outsourcing processes and using suppliers. These need to be managed, and you can't simply be relying on incoming inspection. New section on product safety, and this is a lengthy section. There's a requirement for the organization to have a documented process to manage product safety related products and processes. A lot of speculation just where these requirements come from. We all know the issues GM had with the ignition switch, Takata with the airbags. Documented process for the management of product safety related products and processes. These documented processes shall include but not be limited to the following: identification by the organization of applicable statutory and regulatory product safety requirements, special approvals for the design FEMA, identification of product safety related characteristics, special approval of control plans and process FEMAs, reaction plans, product traceability by lot, lessons learned from new product introduction. So if you have any product safety issues or processes, you need to be looking at A through M in section 4412. Some of the things I just read from the standard are covered in this slide. Identification of statutory regulatory requirements, escalation processes, special approvals of the living control plan and FEMA, etc. Okay, moving into section 5111, it talks about corporate responsibility. Interesting change here. The organization shall define and implement corporate responsibility policies, including at minimum an anti-bribery policy, an employee code of conduct, and an ethics escalation policy or a whistleblower policy. The purpose here is implying responsibility and empowerment at all levels and functions of the organization to follow an ethical approach and report any observed unethical behavior without fear of reprisal. So for some organizations, especially larger organizations, they're going to have an employee code of conduct, an anti-bribery policy, and an ethics escalation policy or a whistleblower policy. Some small to medium-sized enterprises, lower tiers in the supply chain, may not have all of these documents. These do need to be defined. 5112 talks about process effectiveness and efficiency. Nothing really new here. In 511 of ISO TS 16949, the organization had to review their processes to ensure effectiveness and efficiency. The change is that the IATF strengthened the requirement to ensure that the results of process review are now an input to management review. Thus, we have top management performing a review of the process-specific reviews performed by the process owners. So really they're communicating the best practice of the process owners understanding where their process stands and drawing conclusions, and those being communicated to top management at the management review. Five 5113 talks about process owners. The TS 16949 standard did address management responsibility and authority, but it didn't explicitly mention that management ensure process owners understand their role and are competent. Process owners need to be specifically identified. It needs to be very clear who a process owner is. Process owners should have the responsibility and authority for activities and results of the processes that they manage. I know what many companies struggle with is having the responsibility but no authority. Process owners shall understand their roles and be competent to perform these roles. 531, Organizational Roles, Responsibilities, and Authorities Supplemental. This requirement was part of ISO TS 16949. Some modifications were made to address the need to document assigned personnel responsibilities and authorities. There's also been a clarification that the goal is not just to address customer requirements, but to make sure they're met fully. And they clarified that this involves personnel in capacity analysis, logistics information, scorecards, and customer portals. People doing these roles need to be assigned and documented. So I'll read specifically. Top management shall assign personnel with the responsibility and authority to ensure customer requirements are met. These assignments shall be documented, so it needs to be very clear, for example, that Joe and Sally are responsible for accessing the Ford portal to download the Ford performance data, and that Jessica and Mike are responsible for accessing the General Motors platform. There needs to be a clear assignment of responsibilities. 532 is another clarification related to responsibility and authority for product requirements and corrective actions. Top management is responsible for ensuring conformity to product requirements and that corrective actions are taken. There's a clarification that there has to be a process to inform those with the authority and responsibility for corrective action in order to ensure non-conforming products identified, contained, and not shipped. This implies that assigned personnel must always be available to take prompt action to prevent release. Okay, moving into section 6, 6121, risk analysis. Risk has always been a concept embedded in ISO TS 16949. There were requirements for FEMA, requirements for preventive action, continuous improvement, etc. IATF 16949 has adopted additional requirements for risk analysis, recognizing a continual need to analyze and respond to risk and to have suppliers' organizations consider specific risks associated with the automotive industry. Organizations need to periodically review lessons learned from product recalls, product audits, field returns and repairs, complaints, scrap, rework, and implement action plans in light of these lessons. The effectiveness of these actions should be evaluated and actions integrated into the organization's QMS. So essentially this section is telling you what the inputs to your risk analysis should be, lessons learned from product recalls, product audits, field returns, repairs, complaints, scrap, rework, and that you need to maintain records or documented information as a result of your risk analysis. Interestingly, the concept of preventive action comes up now in section 6. It was something that was eliminated from ISO 9001-2015. Really a clarification here, no new requirements. Organization needs to implement a process to lessen the impact of the negative effects of risk appropriate to the severity of the potential issue. And a sound preventive action process should include identifying the risk of the issue should it occur, documenting lessons learned, identifying and reviewing similar processes where the nonconformity could occur, and applying lessons learned to prevent such potential occurrence. 6123 is a greatly expanded section on contingency plans. And whereas contingency plans were a requirement in ISO TS 16949, I personally would have coded this red. I think there's a lot of new requirements here. The organization needs to document a contingency plan, of course. and there needs to be a notification process to the customer and other interested parties. The organization needs to take a systematic approach to identifying and evaluating risk for all manufacturing processes, paying particular attention to external risk. What happens if a critical subcontractor or supplier is down or goes out of business. Contingency plans need to be developed for any of the outlined disruption conditions, interruption of an externally provided product or service, a recurring natural disaster, fire, or any infrastructure-related issue. Again, customer notification is a mandatory step in any contingency plan unless there's no risk for non-conforming product or an effect to on-time delivery. Some really interesting things, there's a requirement to periodically test contingency plans for effectiveness. Example given is simulations is appropriate. Periodically review contingency plans using a multidisciplinary team. So some big changes here. And many people, when I was doing audits, would pull down a dusty document that had, you know, a couple points of contact and a company to provide a backup generator and a temporary staffing agency's phone number. Those aren't going to cut it anymore, folks. Okay, moving into section 6221, quality objectives and planning to achieve them, a clarification. The importance of addressing customer expectations is included in ISO TS 16949, section 5411. The IATF has enhanced this requirement by requiring it be done at all levels of the organization. When the organization establishes quality objectives to meet customer requirements, the objectives need to consider customer targets. So your internal targets should meet or exceed your customer targets. Personnel at all levels need to be aware of and committed to achieving results that meet customer requirements. And any objectives and related targets need to be reviewed periodically for adequacy, at least annually, and make sure that they're being adjusted to drive continual improvement. Okay, moving into section 7. Clarification with 7131. Plant, facility, and equipment planning. In conducting these activities, there's an increased focus on risk identification and risk mitigation. Evaluating manufacturing feasibility, reevaluation of changes in processes, and inclusion of on-site supplier activities. The thought is that many operational risks can be avoided by applying risk-based thinking during planning activities, which also extends to optimization of material flow and use of floor space to control non-conforming products. Capacity planning evaluation during manufacturing feasibility assessments must consider customer contracted production rates and volumes, not only current order levels. So again, really just some clarification here, emphasis on risk. Carryover in 7141, environment for the operation of processes. The requirement from TS 16949 was transferred to IATF 16949. Organization needs to maintain its premises in a state of order, cleanliness, and repair. There's a note that third-party certification to OSHA 18001, or what soon will be ISO 45001, is a way to prove that the organization is meeting personnel safety aspects of that requirement. Measurement systems analysis, 71511. Clarification here that records are now required for customer acceptance of alternative methods. The previous requirement to analyze variation measurement results is now extended specifically to inspection equipment. To be honest, folks, this isn't a change to me. I've always interpreted this to apply only to inspection equipment. Clarification that records of customer acceptance need to be retained along with results from alternative measurement systems analysis. Not a lot new there. Seven 1521 calibration and verification records. What's most important is that the organization needs to have a documented process to manage calibration and verification records in order to provide evidence of conformity. And this includes any on-site supplier-owned equipment. Section also clarifies what calibration verification activities and records need to include. That's listed in a bullet list A through I in the standard itself. Many of these are carryovers, revisions following engineering changes, any out-of-spec readings, an assessment of the risk of the intended use of the product caused by the out-of-spec condition, notification to the customer if suspect product or material has been shipped, etc. Any inspection, measuring, and test equipment and calibration verification activities need to consider applicable internal, customer, legislative, and regulatory requirements in order to establish approval criteria. Seven 1532 requirements related to an external laboratory. Organizations can conduct second-party assessments of laboratory facilities, and a little bit we're going to see a big section on second-party auditor competency. But if an organization chooses to do this, it's going to require customer approval of the assessment method. And if the organization is having its equipment calibrated by the OEM, the internal laboratory requirements apply. So many organizations will send their equipment to a 17025 accredited entity for calibration or verification. This is fine. That 17025 accreditation says a lot. If there isn't an entity that's 17025 accredited to verify a certain piece of equipment, it can be sent to the OEM, but that OEM needs to meet the internal laboratory requirements in section 71531 of IATF 16949. Seven 721 discusses competence supplemental. Big change here is establishing and maintaining a documented process for identifying training needs, including awareness. And awareness includes knowledge of the organization's quality policy, quality objectives, the individual's contribution to the QMS, what are the benefits of performing better, and what happens when the QMS is not meeting requirements. So what essentially we're saying here is that any of these questions are fair game for any operator on the floor, any lower level inspector. They need to be able to talk about the quality policy, quality objectives, how they influence or impact the quality management system, what happens if the supplier is not performing well, and what happens when they're performing appropriately and meeting customer requirements. There's an emphasis on the fact that customer requirements for OJT need to be included, not just quality requirements. And they use the term here, a documented process as opposed to a procedure, implying that these activities need to be managed via a PDCA cycle and not merely performed. So you're planning what you're going to do, you're doing it, you're checking for effectiveness, and then you're acting when you're not getting the desired response. (722) on-the-job training, clarification, enhancing the emphasis of on-the-job training and its importance in meeting customer requirements, including other interested parties. The process has to include any relevant interested party requirements as an input in determining the need for OJT, and then consider the level of education and complexity of the tasks in determining the method used. These requirements for OJT pertain to contractor agency personnel and convey the consequences of nonconformity to customer requirements to all persons whose work affects quality. So this really is a clarification from what was previously in IATF 16949. Not much new here when comparing the two standards. 723, internal audit or competency. This is a greatly enhanced section incorporating many of the customer-specific requirements. The organization has to have a documented process to ensure that internal auditors are competent that takes into account any customer-specific requirements. Organization has to provide or maintain a list of qualified internal auditors. There are different competencies for quality management system auditors versus product and process auditors. However, they should all be able to demonstrate the following minimum competencies: understanding the automotive process approach to auditing, including risk-based thinking, understanding applicable customer-specific requirements, understanding applicable 9001 and IATF 16949 requirements related to the scopes of the audit, understanding applicable core tool requirements, and know how to plan, conduct, and report and close out audit findings. These competencies that apply to internal auditors also apply to second-party auditors, and you'll see that 723A through E is very similar to 723A through F, 724A through F related to second-party auditors. There are also additional requirements for manufacturing process auditors. Need to demonstrate technical understanding of the manufacturing process being audited. Do they know molding? Do they know painting? Do they know plating? They need to understand the FEMA and the control plan for that process. And product auditors need to understand the product requirements and appropriate use of the relevant measuring and test equipment. Section 731 is entitled Awareness Supplemental. Organization needs to maintain documented information demonstrating employees are aware of their impact on product quality and the importance of their activities in achieving, maintaining, and improving quality, including customer requirements and the risks involved for the customer with non-conforming product. So I think this correlates really nicely with 722, competence and on-the-job training. You need to be training people on the quality, not only their jobs, but the quality policy, quality objectives, how they impact the quality of product, the benefits of improved performance, the problems associated with poor performance. That's fair game for an audit. Auditors can ask any person in the facility those types of questions. 731 is now telling you you need to maintain this as documented information. Evidence employees are aware of these things. 732, employee motivation and empowerment. This is a carryover. The organization has to have a documented process. So this is a new requirement. The requirement for a documented process for employee motivation and empowerment instead of simply having a process. So it needs to be documented. Section 511 talks about quality management system documentation. Interestingly, ISO 9001:2015 removed the requirement for a quality manual. IATF 16949 has retained it. However, now the quality manual can be one main document or a series of multiple documents that can be hard copy or electronic. This section requires that the organization's processes and interactions are documented as part of their QMS, so no change there. A really important addition is that the organization's quality manual needs to document where in the organization's quality management system customer-specific requirements are addressed. So this is covered in 7511D, and it specifically states a document, i.e. a matrix, indicating where within the organization's QMS customer-specific requirements are addressed. So they're suggesting a matrix. I agree that this is probably the easiest and best way to prove that your QMS is addressing all applicable customer-specific requirements. 75321, record retention. This section requires a record retention policy that is defined and documented, including the organization's record retention requirements. Certain types of records are called out. These aren't really anything new. Production part approvals, tooling records, design records, etc. If there's no customer or regulatory agency retention period for a certain type of documents, it's understood that the length of time that the product is active for production and service plus 1 calendar year shall apply. Section 75322 talks about engineering specifications. So here there's a new requirement for a documented process for describing the review, distribution, and implementation of all customer engineering standard specifications and related revisions based on customer schedules. A lot of people covered this in their required procedure for document control. I often saw it there, so hopefully that's not new. And if there are no overriding customer agreements, reviews of engineering standard specification changes should be completed within 10 working days of receipt of notification. Okay, so we've now covered changes in sections 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the new IATF 16949-2016. We'll cover the next set of changes in next Wednesday and the following Wednesday's webinar. And that following Wednesday webinar on March 29th will get us through the entire standard. I'll now open the floor to any questions on what we covered today or what we covered on last Tuesday's presentation relating to the transition policy or rules 5th edition. Again, because all participants have been muted to ensure sound quality, please type any questions you have into the question feature. Slides and a recording will be made available within 24 to 48 hours after today's webinar. please go to our website, www.pjr.com. And this is also the place where you can access previous recordings of other webinars, sign up for future webinars. A lot of great free training going on. Again, the presentation will be made available for all participants to use for your internal training. Getting a lot of questions on that. Getting a good question from Tim. How many documents are required now for the new standard? Is there a list to summarize all the required documents? To be honest, Tim, I haven't counted, but what we have done is we've gone through the standard, both 9001-2015 and IATF 16949-2016, and made a list of wherever it said procedure, documented information, documented process. And as part of the transition, what we're going to be doing is asking that organizations submit all of these documents in advance of their transition audit to ensure readiness. We don't want to waste our auditors' time or your time or money having you to go through your transition audit if it's clear these requirements aren't in place. This document, the process is to make it available very close to when you transition. But if you'd like a copy in advance, you can request that through your scheduler. Somebody's asking for more detail on customer specific requirements. Ms. Lipsy, you may want to expand on that question. But customer-specific requirements can take many different forms. They aren't just the customer-specific requirements available for download at iatfglobaloversight.org. They can be flowed down in a quality manual, a design record, a purchase order, an agreement, terms and conditions. The intent of the standard, and it always was, but it's very explicit in IATF 16949, is that you're looking at all these documents systematically, going through them with a fine-tooth comb, determining what the requirements are, and showing very clearly in that matrix how your quality management system addresses those requirements. Great question from Peter on 4412. I'm accessing that section of the standard right now. This is a new requirement on product safety. The organization of documented processes for the management of product safety related products and manufacturing processes. So Peter's organization, we do not design products. Are we exempt from product safety requirements? Absolutely not, Peter. Somebody else may be designing these, but you may need to flow down the fact that there's a product safety related characteristic on your process FEMA or control plan. You may need to flow down reaction plans. So you're not exempt from product safety if you're not design responsible. Jeremy's asking, would the matrix addressing customer-specific requirements need to list each individual detail in the customer-specific requirements document, or simply say GM, CSR, FCA, CSR, etc.? Jeremy, I definitely think that that analysis needs to go deeper than just the title of the document itself. For example, the GM customer specific requirements have a lot of different requirements. Some relating to internal auditor competency, some relating to layered process audits. These aren't all going to be covered in the same document of your QMS, so it needs to break them apart section by section, requirement by requirement. That is the intent. It's a lot of work, folks. Very time-consuming process, but a very good exercise to prove and be a gut check for you whether or not you're meeting these customer-specific requirements. Follow-up question from Peter in reference to 4412 process safety. OSHA compliance may not be enough, Peter. No new questions yet. Folks, feel free to ask anything. Even things we covered on the prior webinar related to the transition policy or Rules 5th edition. And that webinar, by the way, has been recorded and is available for download, or will shortly be available for download. What's most important is making sure you have a copy of IATF 16949 2016, Rules 5th edition, ISO 9001 2015. Start going through these documents, doing your gap analysis, going through your customer-specific requirements, and doing your gap analysis. We'll wait a few more minutes to see if we get any other questions. Regarding what we covered today, I think some of the most significant changes relate to the new product safety requirements. For smaller organizations, the requirements for corporate responsibility policies, including anti-bribery, employee code of conduct, and a whistleblower policy. The contingency planning requirements, including simulations or the periodic tests of contingency plans. We often saw a failure of emergency preparedness drills in an ISO 14001 audit. This is very similar. Big changes related to external laboratories and the fact if you're using an OEM for verification, that the OEM has to meet the internal laboratory requirements. If in fact they're 17025 accredited, then it would not be an issue. Things covered in on-the-job training related to any personnel's knowledge of the quality policy, quality objectives, their impact on the quality management system, the benefits of improved performance, what are the risks if things don't happen as they should, and the records associated with those. Some of the customer-specific requirements manifesting themselves in the standard now relative to internal auditor competency, the need for a documented process to ensure internal auditors are competent and the requirements they have to meet, proving the folks meet those requirements, that is very significant. The matrix showing where your QMS meets the customer-specific requirements and the level of detail and work that goes into that. All very significant. April's asking the question, would the customer have to tell the supplier what features would be related to product safety if the supplier does not design the product? Sure. You might get input from the customer on what the product safety features are. You may know through your own manufacturing process or lessons learned from prior similar projects what is a product safety issue, so you may identify some product safety characteristics on your own. The possibility might exist that there may be no product safety issues with a particular product, and that's fine, just to be able to demonstrate that you've done the analysis. Hopefully, Tim, that addresses your question. Wait a few more minutes to see if we get any other questions. Again, happy to address any questions you may have, folks. AIAG also on their website has a great gap analysis tool available. I would consider, if I was an organization transitioning, downloading that tool and using that to guide my gap analysis to figure out what the current gaps are in my 9001 system or TS 16949 system if I'm looking to upgrade or transition. Again, available at aiag.org. Okay, folks, it appears there's no more questions. I thank you for your valuable time today and hope you found this webinar useful. Look forward to meeting with all of you next week and on March 29th. Thank you.